If you remember back in 2018 when Spider-Man PS4 was first releasing, there was this article from Now Deadspin that released by Tom Lay, and he wrote, and he said they turned Spider-Man into a damn cop and it sucks. And this article was widely mocked and made fun of. Well, now Spider-Man is releasing on the PC, or just released today as we're recording this video, and there's more articles. We've got this article from Polygon, Spider-Man Remastered PC Review. All sparkle, no substance. Looks great on PC and Steam Deck if you're okay with being a tool of the state. So there was that article, and via this tweet from Nicholas Diorio, there's another one, which I'm not going to get into. I want to focus on this one from the Polygon, but there's another one. The propaganda in Marvel Spider-Man is a system of its neoliberal attitude. So we're back to the cop bashing again with this Spider-Man game, and it's absolutely ridiculous. And this is who wrote it, by the way. Maddie Myers, and first off, she has pronouns in her bio, so automatically know where this is going. And she's deputy editor at Games, Polygon, co-host of Triple Click Pod and The Mutant Ages, previously of Kotaku, Mary Sue, and Boston Phoenix. And I don't know who Boston Phoenix is, who that website is, but I certainly know Kotaku and the Mary Sue. So again, automatically, you probably know where this is going. And she also has a thread talking about this article and her thoughts on the game, but we'll get to that later. First, we're going to read through some of this article. She says, Marvel's Spider-Man 2018 already got a remaster for PlayStation 5 back in 2020. And now it's been remastered for Windows PC as well, with a spin-off game, Miles Morales, to be released in PC later this year. And despite its glossy sheen on 2 new platforms since its release, it hasn't aged well. In fact, its celebration of both the police and surveillance states is downright cringeworthy today. Newcomers might expect some twist ending in which Spidey discovers and unravels systemic corruption. Maybe if you're blinded by ideology, maybe you expect everything to conform to your opinions, but most people know they wouldn't expect that. But Spider-Man is still just as surface level as the new coat of paint that this remaster offers up. There are criminals and there are civilians, heroes and supervillains, and nothing in between. And I'm skipping through some of this because it's just talking about how it plays on like the Steam Deck and PC and the graphics and whatnot. We're not really focusing on that. But back to the point in hand, Insomniac Games will likely clean up a few unpolished aspects of Marvel's Spider-Man on PC, but there's one big part of this game that won't change, and it might take newcomers by surprise. Probably not, unless you're blinded by ideology. Allow me to quote my former colleague Tom Lay, who wrote a blog post at Deadspin back in 2018, titled, They Turned Spider-Man into a Damn Cop and It Sucks, the one I referenced earlier. And he said, Spider-Man doesn't just help cops by catching armed robbers and putting deranged supervillains in jail, he helps them maintain a high-tech citywide surveillance network. This game mechanic that will be familiar to anyone who has played an open-world RPG in the last decade, what towers functionally do is reveal areas of the game's map to players so that they can find additional missions and collectibles. But it isn't strictly a game mechanic, it's also a narrative choice, and one that comes with some pretty obvious real-life parallels. NYPD buying cutting-edge equipment and software from a shady tech company owned by a billionaire with maniacal tendencies so that it can monitor and collect data on citizens is a dystopian yet sensible video game plot point. It's also literally something that happened in the real New York City. I mean, you probably expect them to have this, as you call it, surveillance state with a bunch of supervillains and criminals running amok like they are in the game, and it's pretty bad in real life, but I don't think it's near that bad. So yeah, maybe a surveillance state, again as you call it, isn't the best, but I would expect them to do that if it was like that in real life. But at the same time, I don't remember them like spying on anybody with that technology. I know Spider-Man has a couple of gadgets and whatnot to help him listen into conversations, and that he uses as like a camera sometimes, like the Spider Bot. But I don't really remember them spying on people with the radio tower mechanics and NYPD stuff. maybe in like a side mission, but I don't remember them really doing that. Maybe I'm remembering wrong, but I just don't remember them doing that. I just really remember them using it for police comms, which is mainly why he did it in the first place, so he can listen into the police comms and find out what's going on, and revealing stuff on the map, like he said. So, I just feel like this point is kind of ridiculous. But she continues. When Lay wrote this post, he'd only played the game for a few hours, so he didn't know how much of a thematic through line this aspect of Spider-Man would be. It's not just a side mission or a throwaway gag, although there are plenty of gags in which Peter pretends to be a hard-scrabble police veteran who calls himself Spider-Cop. Spider-Man works with the police throughout the entire game, and Cop's widespread surveillance of the city is presented as a useful resource. I mean, it is a useful resource, so I don't necessarily know what your point is there, but he doesn't work with the police throughout the game. Once Norman Osborn puts out a warrant for his arrest, they turn on him. And even when he's working with them, there are still some cops that aren't too thrilled with him. So that's also just wrong. And in the DLC, like Nick DiOrio points out, this is a game where a cop goes rogue and becomes a fucking serial killer. And that's completely right. In the DLC, Yuri, who's a cop that's working with Spider-Man throughout the game, she tries to kill Hammerhead, and she gets put on, like, administrative leave, and she ends up becoming a serial killer and killing other mafia that committed crimes that she was working on that she couldn't nail, and she goes fucking crazy. So this point is just completely wrong. Spider-Man isn't a do-gooder kid from Queens helping out his community so much as a willing tool of the state. This was weird in 2018, and critics pointed it out at the time. Then 4 more years went by, with even more public scrutiny and criticism of police forces in America. I'd say unjustly so, given what they're outraged about. But I will say, and I don't want to get too political or anything, with the lockdowns and how they enforce those, I lost a little faith in police, but not for the same reasons as they did. But continuing on, in 2022, Marvel's Spider-Man feels even more out of touch with any real version of an American city. There's supervillains with crazy powers and crazy tech that we don't have in real life. What do you expect? But even with the point she's trying to make, that's just ridiculous. They don't deserve all this hate that you're projecting on them. Even though, like I said, I did lose a little faith with the lockdowns, but regardless, they don't deserve this hate. But she continues, although its crisp new coat of paint is an undeniable upgrade, Marvel's Spider-Man can't help but show its age. It reminds me of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, cute, funny, and ultimately propagating a series of comfortable lies about the NYPD. It's why, as I play, I've spent so much more time on my Steam Deck doing chores around the city, rather than advancing the main story. I've been visiting every single one of Harry Osborn's research stations, which give Peter a chance to use both his superpowers and his scientific know-how to clean up chemical spills and right environmental wrongs. So, you're doing the stuff that fits your ideology. That's what you're saying. You're doing the stuff that aligns with your opinions and ignoring the stuff that doesn't. Not everything has to align with your opinions. Like the research stations, in my opinion, like I'm not a big climate change guy, but they're fine. They're kind of fun. I do those. I 100% it every time I play it. I've played it like 4 or 5 times. So I don't have a problem with it. No, it's just so odd that you can only stomach stuff that aligns with your ideology. Just hilarious. And she ends with, more than once, I've wished the entire game could be as satisfying as those research stations, but these little side quests don't advance the plot, and they offer barely anything in the way of story tidbits or character development. They don't even put a strain on my graphics card, but they do offer a glimpse at what could have been. A version of Spider-Man who helps out where and when he can, not using the power of a massive surveillance state, but rather his own eyes, ears, wits, and web shooters. It's a lot easier to maintain this illusion on the Steam Deck, only halfway paying attention to the plot as I swing through Central Park and rescue a homeless man's pet pigeons. Spider-Man should stay small. He's a friendly neighborhood type after all. I mean, Spider-Man's always kind of focused on where the cops are going, and like, I remember in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, he'd see a police car going by, and then he'd leave to go where that police car is going. So this surveillance stuff just makes it easier for him, listening into the comms and knowing what's happening. It's so stupid to be so upset about this. It's hilarious. But like I said before, she did have a whole thread about this on Twitter. Now the first tweet is just repeating her opening, so we can just go by that. And she says, obviously, I didn't expect the remaster to change any of that. Why would it? That would be absurd. But it's something that has made the wait from 2018 to 2022 unkind to this game. 2018, this was a noticeable problem, but now it's like, damn, really? This? And why are you reviewing it if you don't like it? Why bother reviewing it? Have somebody else do it. Have somebody else do it who likes the game, isn't bothered by going back and playing it. Just crazy. She says you unlock surveillance towers to spy on the whole city. Not really. Could have been Peter hacking into police scanners on his own, or overhearing crimes in his vicinity, or upgrading personal GPS. And it's radio towers because it unveils a big portion of the city as a mechanic of the game, and unveils different locations for different things. That's why it's a radio tower. Every single police station is a fast travel point. The police chief calls you constantly, etc. This is how the entire game works, but it really didn't have to be like this. It's not only out of character for Peter Parker, no it isn't, as we went over, it's also just not how crimes actually work, and not how police would ever realistically operate vis-a-vis a vigilante hero. I don't know this term, so I don't know if I'm saying that right. What's more frustrating is the police are depicted as always being right. No, they're not. Absolutely not. Like I said, they go after Spider-Man after a warrant is issued by the mayor, or at least he's calling for his arrest. So they turn on him unjustly. That's them being portrayed as wrong, not right. And the surveillance system always catches crimes, never false positives, because it doesn't need to be in this game. When the police call Spider-Man asking him to look into leads they are not allowed to look into, they're always right to ask. Well, that's because they have reason to believe that something's happening. That's why they're always right, and even then, not really. But continuing on, in this game, Spider-Man upholds the police state because it's depicted as the actual best way to run the city. It's pretty wild, honestly. Miles Morales changes a lot of this, but doesn't entirely fix it, because this is the entire framework of this version of Manhattan. I mean, how would you run it? What would you do? You're just gonna let all this crime happen, like they do in New York and Chicago? You're just gonna run it like that? I mean, yeah, the less surveillance, the better. But at the same time, what would you do? You know? And then she retweets this guy, said, it was very weird since Spider-Man usually has a terrible relationship with police. Also, there's no way 90% of cops in the city don't stream Jonah's radio show 24/7. It's literally Rush Limbaugh in that game, lol. So this guy's basically saying 90% of cops are, like, hardcore conservatives, I guess. That's just not true. She says it would make so much more sense if the police were hostile to Spider-Man in this game. You don't even have to change that much to do it. Some of them are hostile to him in this game. What game were you playing? Like, every time you do a crime, not every time you do a crime, but sometimes when you do a crime, the cop is like, we had this handled, Spider-Man, you didn't have to do this, or something like that. Like being a little hostile to him. So you're just wrong. And then she retweets this guy. This is the last one. He says, I assume it's a he, says, it's wild how pro-cop / right-wing this whole game is. I kind of sighed and rolled with it until the prison break, at which point it was too much, given the in-game Rikers is based on real-world Rikers, and so, like, the majority of people incarcerated there haven't even been convicted. So first, talk about how pro-cop / right-wing this game is. If this was pro-right-wing, then MJ just wouldn't look as toned down as she does and look more like an old comic book version of her, curves and all. and probably wouldn't even be as involved as she is. And those research stations that she loves so much probably wouldn't be in the game because they just wouldn't think to do it, probably. Not saying they don't care about the environment, just wouldn't think to do it. And there wouldn't be pride flags in the game. Again, not because they're homophobic or anything, because, again, they wouldn't think to do it. So that's just ridiculous. And she says, one of the escaped prisoner's idle dialogue bits, quote, "It's been too long since I got to hit someone." You know how criminals are. They're just criminals, see? Not like civilians, they're simply one or the other. Well, they're in Rikers, which is like a high security prison, because they're bad criminals. And this is a video game where you're stopping criminals from doing bad things. So, I guess you could add some lawyer to the criminals, but, I mean, this is just stupid to complain about. It's one guy. So what's your point? It's absolutely ridiculous. But that's pretty much it here. I just wanted to make fun of this because it's so ridiculous and it's just wrong what she's saying. So I just wanted to cover this because in 2018 I thought it was ridiculous and I still do now. But just let me know what you think about this and let me know if you're gonna play the PC version. I am certainly interested in it. I love this game and I'll probably pick it up at some point. But let me know. Leave a like on the video if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more. Share. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.